Welcome back. This is Laredo Citizens for Good Government. I'm here with Jerry Garza. My name is Sergio Mora, and we are just thrilled with the guest that we have that just walked into the studio, accompanied, very well accompanied, I might add, by Vish, our local trailblazer when it comes to Green Party tree hugger. And, well, let me introduce our guest. She is Dr. Jill Stein, previous candidate for president for the Green Party, and gearing up for another run at it. Dr. Stein, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sergio. And Jerry, it's great to be with you.
So, Doctor, tell us a little bit, first of all, what brought you down here to Laredo? We don't get many people of your stature down here.
Well, when the candidates from the big parties say that they are exploring a run, what they're doing is exploring the millionaires and the billionaires.
Yes.
And, when Mitt Romney, there was all the buzz about was he in, was he out, and then when he was out, it was the rush for his donors. When Jeb Bush announced his exploratory run, you know how he did it? He did it by introducing his super PAC.
The invisible primary, they call it.
Yeah, exactly. The vote before the vote.
Yes.
Which is, I think, has a lot to do with why people don't bother to come out and vote anymore, because the decision's really already been made. But for me and for the Green Party, to explore a run means to go to the frontline communities that are fighting the struggles that really are the core of our lives. Are we going to keep immigrant families together? Are we going to keep immigrants who've been the backbone of this country, ever since it was first invaded, I must say? We immigrants have created this country. Are we suddenly going to shut the door when there's a massive, influx of people who are fleeing the consequences of U.S. policy in Latin America? Are we now criminalizing that movement? This is terribly unjust. This is a critical struggle. The struggles on your Rio Grande, for example, you're sort of ahead of the game there, too, because you're facing the consequences of a severely depleted and polluted river, which just happens to be your water supply, and I don't want to scare anybody, but, there are terrible threats to that water supply.
You need to meet some of the people here, then you'll understand the effects that the water has.
Well, you're not kidding, and this is happening all over the country.
If you drink it, you're going to stay here.
That is true.
Yeah,
that happens.
This is I'm a medical doctor. Right now I say I'm practicing political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses. Got to fix our sick political system. But the reason I got here, was seeing that we have these epidemics from diabetes, from asthma, cancer, learning disabilities, you name it. We have these epidemics of disease now that we didn't used to have when I was growing up, and they didn't come out of nowhere, and our genes don't change overnight. So thank you very much. We can't just attribute it to genetics. There are things around us, from the pollution in our water, in our air, in our food system entirely, that are driving these things. We can do a much better job. So at any rate, here in Laredo, you're fighting those fights, and you're fighting them in a very principled and inspiring way. And for me, exploring a run for the presidency means coming to the frontline communities and asking the question, do you want a candidate? Do you want a campaign that puts the frontline struggles into the front lines of the presidential dialogue? Because otherwise, what are they talking about? They're talking about the difference between Romneycare and Obamacare. What else did they talk about? They talked about gobbledygook, that everyday people couldn't understand. They were talking in lots of technical terms about minutia around tax policy. They didn't really say where they stood on foreign policy. Nobody mentioned the word climate change, and they weren't talking about jobs. It was just mush. It was much what they talked about, and it was hard to say how they differed really from each other, which is why the powers that be worked so darn hard to keep alternative candidates like myself, like Jerry Johnson from the Libertarians, to make us invisible. And, that's not what the American people want. They voted with their feet in 2014 by staying home because the status quo politics is not giving people a reason to come out and vote. And I am exploring, is there need, is there interest for a campaign that can really tell the truth, because I am not sponsored by corporate money. The Green Party is not sponsored by corporate money. In fact, we are the only national electoral party that is not poisoned by corporate money whatsoever. We just don't accept it. So we have the liberty to talk about jobs and living wages. There's no reason that people should be forced to accept dangerous jobs in the oil and gas industry. And let's face it, they're extremely dangerous. I just came from meeting with the oil workers who are on strike in Houston and actually all over the country. The oil workers are walking out because when they walk into the door of their workplace, these refineries, their risk of dying that day is not double your average American worker. It's not triple. It's not 4 times. It's not 5 times. It's not 6 times. It's 700% greater than your average American worker. And it's a danger to the communities around them as well. These plants are exploding. 15,000 people went to the hospital with lung injuries after a big explosion of a Chevron refinery in Richmond, California. So we can do better. We can do better here in Laredo. We can do better all over the country. And we need to put on the table the things that really matter, the kinds of jobs we deserve, and how we can create them.
Tell us a little bit. You mentioned the Libertarian Party. You're the Green Party. Basically, third parties in the United States. What do you see their future to be? And tell us a little bit about the Green Party itself. I mean, the person that comes to mind when you think Green Party, Ralph Nader. So tell us a little bit about what the Green Party is.
The Green Party, as I mentioned, it's the one national electoral party that is not poisoned by corporate money. Now, over the last couple of decades...
How do you get your money?
From everyday people. And we raise most of it actually online, through the Internet, which, in my view, is really healthy, because every time a candidate asks for money directly from someone, there's kind of the implied, you do me a favor, I'm going to keep you specially in mind and do you a favor. It's a very poisonous system, and it creates corruption, as we see happening all around us.
What's that? We've never heard of that.
So we get our money mostly through everyday people who are making small donations. We don't create these special things, PACs and super PACs. We don't collaborate with dark money fundraisers. None of that goes on. We just follow all the rules, and we try to do it without as little candidate involvement as possible. So that gives us the unique liberty to actually respond to what people really need rather than to our donors. Because if you look at who is driving politics right now, the Koch brothers, 2 guys in the oil industry and in the fossil fuel industry. It's bigger than oil. It's just about everything, actually. These 2 guys single-handedly are raising enough money and contributing enough money in the next election. They've already gone on record here. They are exceeding what the Democratic and Republican parties spent jointly in 2012. We spent $7 billion on elections in 2012, and most of that came from a tiny handful of kingmakers. And king is what we have. That is how the American political system works.
It's an oligarchy.
It's totally an oligarchy. I mean, everyday people don't need to be told about the studies, but there are studies that confirm this as well. A recent study by 2 guys, Gillens and Page, out of Northwestern and Princeton, and it looked at policy and legislation that's been passed over the many decades. And what they found was that this has nothing to do with public opinion, and it has everything to do with what the biggest lobbyists and biggest industry want. So it's no wonder. Here they are. They're about to pass this new trade agreement, And I don't know what your feeling is about NAFTA, but as I travel around the country, a lot of people feel like they really got shafted by NAFTA, which was sold to us like it was going to improve our trade balance, it was going to create jobs, it would really drive up industry, and it's actually been exactly the opposite because it had all kinds of hidden loopholes and details that basically encouraged the offshoring of good jobs. At the same time, it dumped a lot of cheap goods into Latin America and Mexico and put millions of farmers out of business, creating this wave of economic refugees coming into the country. And because there were so many unemployed people coming out of NAFTA, it really undermines wages because you have all these people who are looking for work. We haven't gotten over this yet, and then add that to the meltdown in 2008. And why did that happen? We had the meltdown because our dear Bill Clinton, repealed a number of critical protections that had been passed after the last big crash, in the Great Depression. So our political system is very busy doing favors. And let me just say, when Barack Obama was elected, in spite of all the promises about being a people's candidate, what did he do? He gave away the store to Wall Street. We are still bailing out Wall Street and corporations to the tune of $65 billion a month. This is unbelievable. We should be bailing out our students or our homeowners. They are the victims of this waste, fraud, and abuse, not the cause of it.
Doctor, very sorry to interrupt. Fascinating comments. We have to take a quick commercial break. You're listening to Dr. Jill Stein, possible presidential candidate for the Green Party. Can we just go ahead and say presidential candidate? I mean,
you can call
it would help our radio show a lot to say we had a presidential candidate in the studio.
At this point, what you can say is exploratory presidential candidate.
Okay, there you go. That sounds very, very good for us.
Sounds a lot better.
It sounds a lot better. We'll be right back with these quick messages. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the Laredo Citizens for Good Government. This is Sergio Mora. I'm here in the studio with my friend Jerry Garza, and we are thrilled to have two representatives from the Green Party. Vish, candidate for JP, and I mean Green Party, I don't know, a founder, leader, someone that really put the Green Party
on the map.
Come on, Vish, say something, man. The people love to hear you.
I'm glad to be here with Sergio. He's my best friend.
Very
true. Thanks for inviting me back again and again and again. You'll keep hearing from me, Sergio.
We definitely hope so, Vish.
We have to make the city and the county and the country a better place to live.
Well, thank you, Vish. And Dr. Stein, tell us a little bit. I don't think you would be here if the Green Party just hadn't done such a terrific job in this past election cycle, putting itself on the map. So tell us your thoughts on our local Green Party and their work down here.
They set a model for the nation, I think, for Greens and for everyday people, that we don't have to just sit here and take it. We don't have to just, complain about the terrible waste, fraud, and abuse that's going on. Mm-hmm. We can challenge it in the streets, and we can challenge it at city council meetings, but we've got to challenge it in the voting booth if we really want to change things. And this, I think, got like 25%, is that right, on his first run, which is astounding. There was another candidate for county commissioner, is that right? Erica Martinez, who got 41%, is that right? Yeah, so, the Green Party is rising up strong here, as we're seeing third parties, in fact, come up strong in Europe right now, where austerity is really devastating everyday people, and, they're busy carving up the public commons and selling off the Acropolis and, the basic things that really belong to all the people of that country. They're busy selling them off to the oligarchs who got them in trouble to start with. We are on that same trajectory of cutting back on Social Security, the threats to Medicare, the threats to the basic institutions that keep people out of poverty. 1 out of every 3 seniors is relying on Social Security to stay out of poverty right now. We should be strengthening Social Security and making it secure for the long haul, not, continuing to pick away at it, which is what both Democrats and Republicans, Republicans especially, but Democrats are leading the charge, including Obama. He's been a big advocate for his so-called grand bargain, which would cut back on these so-called entitlements. These are basic rights, basic social goods that we have accomplished over the decades. And, we need to stand up to preserve what is good about our society and to improve what's there, because we've got the resources to do it. They're just being hoarded right now by the top 1%. And it's a credit to this and the others here in the Green Party that they are standing up and leading the way like other third parties are beginning to do in Europe. And we're seeing them now go from 3% in the polls. This is in the case of Syriza, the Greek party of resistance and transformation. They used to be 3% 5 years ago. Now they are the dominant party. They hold the prime minister office, and they are the dominant party in parliament. We're seeing this happen in Spain, where this party Podemos is doing essentially the same thing. In the course of 1 year, they have shot up from nowhere to being the dominant party in the polls. And in the United Kingdom, it's the Green Party, which is surging in the polls right now as the alternative party. So, and part of the reason I came to Texas as the very first field trip for our exploratory campaign was because the Green Party is actually doing amazing things in Texas. We ran, I believe, 45 candidates across the state, and several of the statewide candidates were all in the double digits in their first race. So this is a great beginning. I encourage people to go to the website for the Texas Green Party, and that website is
texasgp.org, I believe.
Yeah, try texasgp.org, otherwise Google it. And you can go to my website, which is jill2016.com, and let us know if you think that the election should be about you. If you think the election should be about you, let me know that you'd like me to run, because otherwise you're going to hear about the 1%.
Dr. Stein, I wanted to ask you, you were talking about all these other countries where the Green Party or some form of Green Party, at least in the ideology that the Green Party believes in, has taken off. Why do you think that, considering Congress has an approval rating of 7%, everyone's so dissatisfied with everything, and the things that you all talk about, I think, are things that can really resonate with people, and I think things that people can relate to. Why do you think that type of party, Green Party, hasn't taken off here like it has in other countries across the world?
Well, that's a great question. And if you look at what's going on in these other countries, they too have been struggling to be heard. In the case of Syriza for about 15 years, before suddenly the times caught up with them. You could say they were kind of ahead of the curve, and the curve caught up. But in this country, our political system is very hostile to challengers. It does not like opponents, and I'm sure you see in local politics as well that at least local politics in my home state, they will cut you out of debates, they will cut you out of news coverage. And again, kudos to you wonderful principled journalists here who are giving a voice to other opinions and educating the public. Because lots of the press won't do that. The corporate press tends to lock out opposition candidates. And let me tell you one quick story about how this was, how censorship was exercised against my campaign. Very brutal censorship. I showed up at a debate, a presidential debate, which I should have been in because I was on the ballot for 85% of voters. They deserved to know who their choices were. The League of Women Voters used to run the debates, and when they did, their criteria for entering the debate was basically to just be on the ballot in enough states that you were a potential winner. That was their only criteria. Politics had nothing to do with it. But now the Commission on Presidential Debates is actually run by the Democratic and Republican parties, who basically structure it so that others can't get in. Well, I showed up at a debate. This was in Long Island in New York, just hoping to go in and listen to the debate. But when I tried to get in at the campus gate at this university, I was arrested along with my running mate. We were taken to a secret, dark site where nobody knew where we were, and we were handcuffed to metal chairs for 8 hours, surrounded by 16 Secret Service and police, and we were not released until the crowds had gone home and the press was all gone. And that said to me, wow.
That is astounding.
They are quaking in their boots that we should be able to talk to press, that people might be able to find out that they actually have a choice going into this election. They are just sitting scared that people find out that they have a real choice.
Doctor, I wanted to ask you, we have to take a quick commercial break, but as soon as we get back, I wanted to ask you about how the Democrat-Republican parties consider parties like yours, candidates like yours, to be spoilers. Okay, so we're going to get into that as soon as we get back. We are here with Dr. Jill Stein, exploring a run for the presidency for the Green Party. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
99.3.
Yeah.
That's what's frustrating me.
I know, Vish. I know. Settle down.
Settle down, Vish.
No, you are talking on the air. We are on the air. No, yes, we are. Doctor, so I wanted to ask you, the term spoiler is very commonly used to describe the third parties in the United States. God bless Ross Perot, for example. He got Bill Clinton elected president.
He sure did.
And the thing is, the Libertarians, their views align very closely with the Republican Party. And the Green Party's views align with the progressive, some would say liberal wing of the Democratic Party. So basically the accusation is that you guys hinder the opportunity of a Democrat getting elected. For example, if you run, you get 15%, 20%. That's votes that you are directly going to take from the Democratic candidate because they're not going to vote for the Republican candidate because of the views. What are your thoughts on that? Being a spoiler for the Democrats?
Yeah. Well, actually, we have a spoiler political system right now, because who's the biggest block of voters? It's people who aren't voting. Mm-hmm. Don't they count? Don't they matter? Don't they deserve a candidate that speaks to them, that earns their vote? Our votes don't belong to any party. What a really, incredibly outrageous thing for them to imply, that they own our votes. What? Mm-hmm. We the voters own our votes, and they need to earn them. And if they can't earn them, then those votes are going to go somewhere else. And if you look at 2014, that's exactly what happened. That's why the Republicans won. No harm intended here, but the Republicans won. It wasn't their victory. It was the loss of the Democrats, because those votes that the Democrats think they own didn't come out to vote for them.
Very true.
Who didn't come? Latinos didn't come. Women didn't come. Youth didn't come. And working people didn't come. So those votes are already lost to the Democrats. Let's forget it. Stop crying over spilled milk. Democrats, you lost those votes. You have lost your voters. 1 out of 3, roughly, are coming out to vote. And in local elections, it's shamefully less than that. So the horses are already out of the barn. And the horses are looking for a place to drink and a place to eat. And they deserve candidates that actually speak to them. That's that's kind of, I think, the simplest and most straightforward response to that hype. What it is hype. It's intended to intimidate you by these political parties that have become predators. They are predators that are trying to manipulate voters into voting for more of the same. When the policies are taking away our jobs. They are taking away decent wages. They are forcing a system of health care on us that has been a boondoggle for insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies, and terrible for working people, for people who are just an inch above the poverty level, if at all. Our health care costs have doubled under Obamacare. So for them to say, to try to scare us into voting for more of what's killing us, more Wall Street bailouts, more of this ever-expanding war that knows no end, more of the militarization of the border, and the neutering of the Constitution within 20 miles of the border, where police can come up and strip you of your clothing if they desire, of your constitutional rights in the name of security. This is not a good thing, and there's no better way to throw away your vote than by voting for more of the same.
Doctor, Jerry?
Well, I actually just wanted to follow up on that. Since you did bring up the issue of immigration reform being on the border, huge issue for us here along the border. What's your take on immigration reform, and where do you think we should take that?
I think we need to start by respecting human rights and understanding that immigrant rights are human rights, above all. I think we need to go back to the drawing boards and look at our U.S. policies that are forcing people to migrate. We're looking at economic refugees and refugees from political violence that have resulted from the instability brought by illegal U.S. policy, violations of international law, where we overthrew democratically elected governments. We either instigated those coups or we supported them in Guatemala, in Honduras, in El Salvador, and a police state, with the war on drugs in Mexico that we're essentially funding. So we are creating this crisis of migration. That's where, as a medical doctor, I look at not just Band-Aids on things. I look at what is the real problem here. What is the crisis? What's the illness, and how do we fix it? So we need to go back to the drawing boards there. But for those immigrants who have become part of the fabric of our communities and our economy, who are actually good for our economy, forget that nonsense on Fox News where they like to blame immigrants for our economic woes. It's absolutely false, and it's actually the opposite, because immigrants are contributing to our tax base, yet they are not qualifying for, for services and support and health care and things like that.
I want to clap. Can I clap? Doctor.
Just in brief, I would just conclude by saying we need to create a welcoming path to citizenship and recognize immigrants for the strength and vitality and diversity that they bring to our nation. This is what we've always been about.
Yeah. And Doctor, the United States spends over $40 billion a year on the drug war. Washington, D.C. just legalized recreational use of marijuana. What are your... that's extremely ironic that the capital of the United States, the capital of the global war on drugs, just legalized drugs. Yet they're not letting up. Yet they're not letting up. They're giving billions of dollars to a corrupt government in Mexico, where that money is being used towards political repression instead of fighting the war on drugs. And that's just one example of the destabilization that the war on drugs is causing worldwide, causing people to flee because of the violence, the lack of opportunities. It corrupts political systems from the top down. What is your stance on U.S. drug policy?
Yes, well, as a medical doctor, I would say that our drug policy needs to be informed by science. Right now, it flies in the face of science. The fact that marijuana, that cannabis, and hemp are considered dangerous illegal drugs is really a joke and completely flies in the face of science. So, the listing of those drugs, for example, as dangerous substances needs to be changed to start with. And once that happens, we have no basis for the majority of the war on drugs. And consistent with that, I'd say in general, we need to treat substance abuse as a public health problem, not as a criminal problem. Because to criminalize drug use creates the real problem. It's the war on drugs which makes drugs dangerous, which creates the underground economy, which creates the gang violence, which creates the things that are really dangerous about illegal drugs is the illegal drug culture. So the minute you legalize it and treat it as a public health issue, or you don't even have to legalize it, you can decriminalize it. There are a variety of ways to deal with it, but suffice it to say, it should no longer be, the thing that we throw people in jail for if they are participating in the recreational use of drugs. They are not participating in violent crime. And I think this needs to be retroactive as well. Our jails are overflowing with the discriminatory enforcement of drug laws, largely against Latinos and African Americans, who are massively overrepresented in jail. And those are ruined lives. Those are destroyed lives and destroyed communities who are losing, their young men in particular. And once you're out of jail with that record, you're not eligible for housing assistance, you're not eligible for education assistance. These are destroyed lives. So we need to change the policy and the secondary policy surrounding it to treat drug abuse as a public health problem and actually fix it. And one last comment there is that so much of what drives the drug culture is the absence of jobs and hope and sense of community, from our neighborhoods. So part of the solution here is ensuring that we have quality schools and jobs, which is part of what we call our Green New Deal that I'll talk about at some point in this program. Solutions come together in the same way that crises are all converging right now. We can turn it around and have a series of solutions that converge, that create a virtuous circle of how we improve society and our quality of life.
Doctor, we have right now in Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's, I think the Republicans had capitulated. I think I saw something, but basically the gist, the Republicans are willing to withhold funding from the Department of Homeland Security in order to have our president give way in his views on immigration. This is not the first time they do it. They shut down, our esteemed U.S. Senator virtually single-handedly shut down the federal government for a couple of weeks last year, throwing a tantrum because he wasn't getting his way. And I mean, the Republicans, they are in a situation where because of redistricting, congressional districts are becoming more Republican in Republican areas, more Democrat in Democratic areas. The primary system for the Republicans means that they are forever terrified of a Tea Party opposition knocking them out. So they have to take a very, very hard, very unreasonable stance on a lot of issues. What is wrong with this system? The government of the best country, the richest country in the world, has a government that does not work. How do we fix this?
I think there's an overarching solution here. It's not working in terms of, that it doesn't get things done. Unfortunately, when it gets things done, they're often really bad things. They are declarations of war. They are corporate trade agreements. They are bailouts for Wall Street. And they are, things like Obamacare. So when they get things done, it's largely favors for the oligarchy, for the 1%, and they are policies that harm everyday working people and people who are struggling for jobs in our schools and all the rest. So, it's a double-edged sword. We're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. Because either way, if they do or if they don't accomplish things, either way they're kind of screwing us. So, the fundamental problem there is that it's no longer, what should we say, living, thinking, breathing, feeling human beings who are supposed to represent the best of our values and the best of our ability to collaborate, to do mid-course correction, to deliberate. That's what our elected officials are supposed to be. They're supposed to take the best of us from our communities, the best of our ideals, and deliberate with each other to that benefit. Well, now you have people coming into office who are there because they owe favors to the health insurance industry, to the pharmaceutical, to the fossil fuel industry, to the war manufacturers. These are who drive people into office. So they don't come representing us. They come with rigid agendas of payback. So there is no dialogue. There is no thinking. There is no human spirit and sense of human rights or justice in those halls of power. They are just raw halls of power, and they represent big money. So it's no surprise that they can't get anything done because they're all obliged to their funders, period. That's it. You know, they're not worried about the Tea Party. They're worried about their funding from the Koch brothers, you know. So they're going to do what it takes to maintain their funding. That's their prime, responsibility. So it's no surprise that they can't work it out with each other. They can't compromise. They can't deliberate, which to my mind says exactly why we need a system change in our politics, that one good person operating within a corrupt party that's been sold out, whatever your party is, if it's taking corporate money, if it is fundamentally funded by Wall Street and the banks, it's not going to do it. We need a fundamental change. That's why I encourage people, to check out your local Green Party, because it sends a signal, whether we win the race or not, it sends a signal that we the people are not going to be good little boys and girls anymore and march right over the cliff. We're not going to be good little lemmings, because that is what we are being asked to do, sacrifice our economy, our jobs, our health care, our children's future. We're just not going to do it. We're standing up, and we're seeing that happen all over America, and we're going to take that into the voting booth.
The system of campaign finance, obviously, it allows, we just had the ruling from the Supreme Court, Citizens United, from a Republican-dominated Supreme Court that allows unlimited corporate money into the political process. You said it yourself. Most of the members of Congress are heavily funded by corporate interests. How do we fix that?
And millionaires themselves, it turns out.
And a lot of millionaires. Yeah.
Yes, I think
it's a great gig.
Yeah, it sure is. We have to turn that around, I think, by working together, by overcoming the barriers that keep us working on one issue and one issue only. As long as we are divided, we will be conquered. So we tend to, we're organized as groups to work on, say, labor issues, or we will work on health care issues, or we'll work on the environment, or we'll work on schools and education, student debt. That's exactly the way they want us. They want us divided across issues and across geography. How we change this is by getting to critical mass. Because we have it, if you start connecting the dots, 1 out of every 3 African Americans who are held hostage by the prison system, in prison on probation or parole, 1 in 3, 40 million students and recent graduates who are in debt, millions of homeowners who are just struggling to barely keep from losing their homes. These 1 out of 2 Americans that's either in poverty or very low income and heading towards poverty. So that's a lot of people. That's an unbelievably lot of people. If we can work together and get the word out that there's actually an alternative that is of, by, and for the people, we could turn this around in a heartbeat. Redistricting or not, gerrymandering or not, if we could get those people to vote who don't currently have a reason to come out and vote, we can overwhelm the impact of gerrymandering. We can overwhelm the impact of money. And in fact, they are driving people into our court because all that excess money goes into negative TV advertising. People are offended by it. They're horrified by it, and they will run to the alternative. They are going to drive people into our camp if we decide to go ahead and run, and if we then get the word out that people actually have a choice.
Doctor, you brought up the media a little while ago. What are your thoughts on the state of the media? For example, Republicans like to watch Fox News. Democrats like to watch MSNBC. It's getting to a point that you, just like everything else that's corporate, it's a market. They're fighting for a market of like-minded people. You know, how does that bode for parties like yours, for people like you, for example? How do you get your message across? Because you don't have a cable news channel that appeals directly to probable Green Party voters.
Yeah, and just to add to what you're saying, they are fighting not only for market share, they're fundamentally fighting for advertising dollars, which is why, you know, it's not only that they want a market, they are creating a market. You know, they are creating a biased and polarized public because they are essentially putting out public relations spin for their advertising. You know, Fox News, excuse me, has done so much to polarize and put fear into the heart of Americans. They create fear campaigns. They distort issues. So, you know, they not only feed on divided public opinion, they create divided public opinion in order to serve the agenda of their big funders. So, you know, the public airwaves belong to us. They fundamentally belong to us. And we need to revise FCC rules. We need to change FCC, that is the Federal Communications Commission. We need to change those appointments to have the rules reverted to supporting public use of the public airwaves. And we, the people, have just won an incredible victory on the public use of the Internet, where the FCC and President Obama were on the verge of privatizing the Internet. And because the public mobilized and said, no how, no way, you're not going to do that. This is our Internet. We were able to preserve what's called net neutrality, which means they can't slap big costs onto us and deliver Internet service based on your ability to pay. So we need to now do the same thing with regard to airwaves. In the meantime, there's so much we can do with that Internet that we're going to continue to have with Facebook, with social media. We need to conduct a guerrilla campaign. And the good news is that we now have these tools in the presidential exploratory campaign that we're running. We now have access to good digital tools for organized that can help everyday people reach out and get their networks involved. So we have the ability to run a really strong guerrilla campaign. This is always how transformational social change has happened. You know, the quote from way back, was it Marshall McLuhan, commentator on media, said, you know, the revolution will not be televised. You know, the status quo is not going to give its blessing to the rising up of deep social change. It's not going to do it. We have to do it. That's how it's always been. And fortunately, there are the tools there that are available to us to do it.
Doctor, fascinating discussion with Dr. Jill Stein, possible presidential candidate. She is exploring a run for the presidency for the Green Party. We have to take a quick commercial break. Give us a call, 712-2993, if you have any questions for Dr. Stein. We have to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Laredo Citizens for Good Government. This is Sergio Mora, your host, filling in for Jay St. John. He'll be back on Monday. I'm here with Jerry Garza. He stepped out briefly. He'll be right back. And we're here with the Green Party, the Vish local Green Party leader, and he has been kind enough to invite on the program Dr. Jill Stein, who's exploring a run for the presidency for the Green Party. She is from Boston, Massachusetts. She's a medical doctor. We've been having a great talk, and we have a caller that's on the air. Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Shoot.
I had multiple questions. One was, what does she think about the war on terror? Should we have been in that war? And the reasons that were given to us for the war, does she agree with? Two would be, does she believe in universal health care for everybody in America? And 3 would be what she thought of Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont. And the 4th thing is thank you very much for opposing the Keystone pipeline.
Oh, thank you. Those are great questions, caller. Doctor.
Wonderful questions, and let's take them one at a time. The war on terror has been a disaster which has made us less secure, not more secure. It's made America really the pariah of nations, where we have gone in and, dropped bombs and used the drones. We have turned nations from supporting us to considering us the terrorists, and the case in point there is Pakistan, where we used to enjoy incredible public opinion support, and now the U.S. is regarded really as the chief threat to security in the region and in Pakistan among everyday people. And this is well documented by academic studies, if you needed a study to tell you that it's wrong to drop bombs on people while you are looking for one person, just kill a whole wedding party, It's been a terrible, disastrous thing, and it has only gotten us in deeper. Osama bin Laden himself was trained by U.S. Forces, by the CIA, as our effort to counter the Soviet Union when it made the mistake of getting into Afghanistan, and we then went on to take their place. Traditionally, we fight these wars, which are really wars for oil and resources and for pipeline routes. We fight these wars by pitting local sectarian groups or warlords against each other. We make deals with the devil, and the devil comes back to haunt us in a big way, and we only dig ourselves in deeper. And ISIS, unfortunately, is an example of that, bred out of the wasteland that we created in Iraq, out of the very hostile regime that we installed against Sunnis. Why is ISIS doing so well? Because the public largely supports them. Why does the public support them? And this is, for example, in Iraq, that they have done so well. They've been able to take over so many towns. Not only that they are ruthless and horrific and, exercise all kinds of terrifying human rights abuse, but nonetheless, that was done by their predecessors as well that we were supporting. And in fact, we previously supported ISIS, and both us and our allies, have fomented this incredible cauldron of warfare, indiscriminate warfare among all kinds of groups. It's impossible to tell who the good guys and who the bad guys are. We just throw weapons into it and say, go at it, you guys. It's been an incredible disaster. You can't fix it by throwing more weapons into it. We need to create a weapons embargo. We should have an arms embargo, certainly into Syria and Iraq, really throughout the Middle East. The U.S. has been profiteering by being, as Martin Luther King said, the main purveyor of violence and the main purveyor of weapons around the world. We have created really this intense conflict, which has been an absolute disaster. We need to, number one, in addition to the arms embargo, we need to start applying international law and human rights in place of this policy of total economic and military domination, which regrettably has been sort of the basis of our foreign policy. So there you go on that question, the war on terror.
Great response.
And I'll just be very brief. You asked about universal health care. Yes, indeed, I support Medicare for all, and it needs to be an improved Medicare system because it's been really deteriorated. There are all kinds of holes into it. Medicare needs to be restored and then expanded to everyone. That's how we can save money, improve our health, and take the profiteering and the wasteful bureaucracy out of the current healthcare system. That's eating up as much as 30 cents on every dollar. We don't have that kind of money to waste on health insurance and pharmaceutical profiteering. So we can do Medicare for all. On Bernie Sanders, we've been trying to establish a dialogue with Bernie Sanders, I must say, for years, and have yet to have a return phone call or or email, which says to me that Bernie Sanders is fairly wedded to the Democratic Party. And as much as I agree with many of his policies, and not all of them, on many of his policies he's certainly taking big steps in the right direction. But he's wedded to a party that will not support that. And Dennis Kucinich is an example of how the Democratic Party marginalizes candidates of integrity, will keep them out of the debate dialogue. So it's not as though this debate is going to get advanced within the Democratic Party. And then you can look at 6 years under Barack Obama, where a candidate was elected on these principles whose hands were completely tied, which is why I would encourage people from the outset to consider supporting a campaign of integrity outside of the Democratic Party, because we know where this leads. We've been here. We've done that. You cannot reform the party from within when the party is wedded to its funding. And the final question was, for opposing the Keystone. Yes, and our fight goes on because now we have lots of other Keystone pipelines, and we need to start supporting clean renewable energy jobs, which is where we will really create the jobs. That's the big secret out there. They don't want people to know that the real jobs, the jobs bonanza, and the healthy jobs that are good for workers, that don't require workers to take their life in their hands in order to do the job, this is where we have a win-win, and that's what the future looks like.
And the Keystone itself, President Obama just vetoed it. A lot of people don't know that that pipeline is designed to carry product from Canadian tar sands, which is basically strip mining, destroying the environment, a very dirty, dirty product. And the interest in the Canadian tar sands are overwhelmingly owned by our friends, the Koch brothers.
Exactly, and the products will be shipped offshore anyhow. They are not coming to the U.S.
They're not. They're just
nothing to do
traversing it.
And putting our water supplies at risk.
Caller, you're on the air.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a quick question. If she believes her message resonates so much with the common folk, then why on a national election do they draw so few voters?
Great.
Thank you, caller.
Great question. And I'll just mention something I may have referred to earlier, which is that when I showed up, just showing up at a debate that I should have been in because I was on the ballot for 85% of voters, and don't voters deserve to know? Because you're making exactly the point here, is that people don't, people basically don't know their choices. They don't know that they have choices, and they don't know a darn thing about them. And that's not by coincidence. That is by design. When I showed up at that debate, I was arrested, taken to a secret dark site, and handcuffed to a chair for 8 hours until the press and the crowds had gone home. And one other thing I'll mention, in the first election that I ran, where I was sort of tricked into running for office, had no idea what I was actually getting into, but I was running for governor in Massachusetts against Mitt Romney and the Democratic treasurer of the state back in 2002, and we essentially fought our ways into a televised debate. I was allowed into that debate where I talked about these things that I think people resonate with, like the right to health care, the right to a college education. Public higher education should be free. Actually, I don't know if that was the issue at the time, but that is certainly the issue right now, that higher education should be free and we should be ending student debt. This is what really resonates with people now. Back then in 2002, I think it was bilingual education that I was standing up to defend, and calling for downsizing the military and spending those dollars here and our desperate needs at home. Inside the debate hall, we were in a TV studio, those ideas were treated like they were lunatic fringe, and the other candidates didn't even bother to rebut them or engage them in any way. And I was sort of feeling like, oh, well, I tried. And as we walked out of the debate hall, I was mobbed by the press, who told me that I won the debate on the instant online viewer poll. And that, to me, turned the lights on, and I understood why they worked so darn hard to keep us out of the debates, why they don't want people to know that we're out there. So it's not by coincidence that they engineer these low vote scores, and they do everything that it takes in order to do that. And this is typical. This is how transformational change works. The status quo will always suppress knowledge of the opposition. It's really in our hands to do a guerrilla campaign, a door-to-door, a neighbor-to-neighbor, an online campaign to let people know that they have choices. But the first step is let me know if you would like this campaign to go forward. Would you like a campaign that's about you? This is an exploratory campaign right now. Democrats and Republicans are exploring behind closed doors with the millionaires and billionaires. I'm exploring by coming to Laredo, by going to the oil workers in Texas, by going to the town of Denton, where the people are fighting to save their water supply from the fracking. This, to me, is where the exploring ought to be done. So let me hear from you at Jill2016.com. Thank you.
We have time for one more caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, the biggest taboo question of all that seems to be haunting our political system is religion. I'm a big supporter of separation between church and state. I don't know if you're trying to say if you're religious or not on the air or not, and what do you think about it? And just by you talking, I have switched my vote to you.
There you go. Thank you, caller.
Thank you. I am not terribly active. I'm in a family which is of mixed religious background. My background personally, from my family of origin, was Jewish. I'm married to someone who's an atheist who comes from a Protestant background, and where our kids stand, it's kind of their choice. I certainly have respect for all religions, I must say, and I strongly believe, as you have said, in the separation of church and state. It's absolutely fundamental to democracy. It is a threat to world democracy and to world peace when we allow that separation to be overcome. So I strongly agree with you. Thanks so very much.
Well, thank you, callers, for your very, very good questions. We have to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Dr. Jill has to take off. As soon as we get back, she'll just say goodbye, and then we'll continue on. This is Laredo Citizens for Good Government. Go in. Welcome back to Laredo Citizens for Good Government. Dr. Stein, she unfortunately has to leave. One last question that came in through social media from Carmen, and she's asking, there's a lot of confusion. Big issue right now is validity of vaccines. It's a big issue. It's all over the news. What's your stance on that, Doctor?
So let me just say very briefly, because it's a complicated issue, and it should not be simply broad brushstrokes into one little pigeonhole. And I say this as a medical doctor who has, delved in the past into a lot of health and safety issues. Let me say, above all, we need a regulatory agency that is protecting us, the public, that is about us, that can look into the science, which always has uncertainties, but which can look at the state of the science in an overarching way, at the details, at the big picture, and evaluate them in the interests of we, the public, not in the interests of the vaccine industry or the GMO industry or the pharmaceutical industry. And yet, who is it, that's up at the higher echelons of the Food and Drug Agency? Unfortunately, it's big industry like Monsanto, where one of the deputy commissioners of the FDA was a Monsanto lobbyist and a Monsanto executive. And that's just one instance of how industry is paying to play. It's a pay-to-play regulatory agency like so many of our agencies. So no wonder the public is up in arms and very concerned about their health and safety. I previously volunteered with a physician organization called Physicians for Social Responsibility that in the past looked closely at the issue of vaccine safety, and it's a complicated issue, and it should be evaluated with the public in mind and completely free of the interests of those who might want to manufacture vaccines, sell them, and have a captured market. That said, there are clearly benefits to some and probably most vaccines. There are clear benefits. There may be particular groups who are at risk and those groups need to be looked at. We need the proper studies, and to my knowledge, the long-term, what we call prospective studies, have not been done. We need to look not only at vaccines, we need to look at the influence of diet, we need to look at the influence of other pharmaceuticals and pollutants and so on. There are many things that are contributing to these current public health epidemics, of which childhood disability is a major consequence and a major epidemic. It deserves a broad and comprehensive study that looks not only at potentially vulnerable subgroups to vaccine side effects that may occur, for example, in combination with certain kinds of medications or when a child is ill. There may be certain circumstances that predispose to problematic outcomes. We need studies to find out about this, and they need to be long-term and comprehensive studies. To my knowledge, they haven't been done. So the bottom line here is that there's no quick fix. On the whole, there are major important benefits to vaccines, but there may be certain susceptible subgroups. And, you know, the bottom line is we need a regulatory agency that is sorting this out for us. This should not be a burden put on consumers to somehow tiptoe our way through minefields. And I mean not only, you know, the potential for side effects from vaccines, I mean the real understood harmful effects of chemicals out there to which children are exposed, mothers and fathers at the time of conception while mothers are carrying children. Those are the exposures for which there is overwhelming evidence, for example, that pesticides are extremely harmful, that mercury, that lead, things that people are being routinely exposed to, that bisphenol A and other things that are in consumer products. These exposures we know are dangerous, and the public is not being protected from them. So we need to expand the focus of public concern here and do the studies and and get the predators out of the business of running our regulatory agencies.
Doctor, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. Parting words for our audience.
It's wonderful to be here in Laredo, where you are leading the charge for justice, for immigrants, for immigrant rights, for protecting our civil liberties, for protecting our water supply, where we need jobs and where we have the potential for a solar renaissance. Everybody who needs a good-paying job, a living wage job, and a union job where you're protected, we could have those jobs right here, right now, if we had the proper stimulus for a very small stimulus package. We can get a solar economy going and a green economy going that will solve our economic crisis at the same time that it solves not only our climate crisis, but it can get us out of all these wars for oil. And believe it or not, the health benefits are so overwhelming when we go to a green energy system and a system of local and sustainable food production as opposed to the industrialized GMO, fossil fuel intensive food system. By moving to an overall green economy, we improve our health so much that the savings in sick care expenditures are enough to pay for the transition itself. This is a win-win-win. This is the kind of thing that we can do together. This is why I encourage you to stand up and own our politics. Don't give it to them. Check out our exploratory campaign at jill2016.com and let us know if we should go forward and ensure that you have a voice in the presidential debate. You should not be in the sidelines. You should not be at the fringe. You should be at the core. Thanks for checking us out.
Thank you, Doctor.